I want to thank you so much, Professor Griggs, for joining us this morning. And for those who may not know, Professor Michael Griggs is at Wayne County Community College. You know, my favorite college, Wayne County. Thanks so much. You know,
Thank you.
well, I think you can hardly turn on a news program or a talk program without hearing about our young black men who have been murdered. Ferguson, Missouri, New York, Florida, Georgia, you name it. And I just want you to give us some of your thoughts on what's been happening.
Well, right now they have a statistic out.
Okay.
And it says that every 28 hours, somebody black is murdered by the police department.
By the police department, not just murdered.
That's right.
But by the police department, every 28 hours.
Every 28 hours, somebody black is murdered.
Heard that, yes.
By the police department.
Okay.
And to put this in a historical context, the modern day police department has its roots in colonial America. It started as the slave patrol. Most people don't know that.
The police department started as the slave patrol during the colonial days?
Patrol. And their primary purpose was to have an adversary relationship with black people, to harass and restrict the freedoms of black people. So stop and frisk, which is the popular term now for pulling people over, asking to see ID, that actually started during slavery. If you would see somebody black, you would approach them and you would ask to see their papers, to see if they were free black person, if they were a free black person or not. Many times those papers were meaningless, even if they were valid. And a lot of times black people found themselves back on the plantation. But for 400 years, we have had this adversarial relationship with law enforcement because a lot of times people, you know, we fail to understand that that was their primary purpose, was to harass and restrict the freedoms of black people. And they have been doing this consecutively since their inception.
You know, I had wondered about that because we've all, well, most of us anyway, have heard about the papers that the slaves carried or the freed slaves carried. And I often wondered how they could hold on to them with the kind of hatred that was shown then and now.
Yeah, it was difficult for people to maintain their freedom, or to have the type of freedom. We're still fighting to have the type of freedom that we should have. But a lot of times when we have these discussions, like on television, we think as if it's some widespread 50-state phenomenon, coincidence. That is the very agency of law enforcement. That was their primary purpose. It's a white guy named Douglas Blackman who has a book out called Slavery by Another Name. And he documents this and how they just railroaded law enforcement, many of which later on, you know, Ku Klux Klan, they were the sheriffs, and, you know, and that's what they did. And they continue to do this. So until we change the agency of law enforcement, this will continue.
You know, I wonder myself sometimes, you know, they say they do, we had an officer on and who spoke about a 4-hour evaluation, psychological evaluation that they had to go to, and I guess they've reduced the number to maybe about an hour, maybe a half hour, as opposed to what it generally used to be. And, you know, sometimes I wonder, is there a way to really get an idea of, you know, you get somebody, you know, outside of the community, he wants to get the job and everything, but is there a way to really test if there's prejudice or bias or, you know, on this individual? I mean, I don't know how the tests are conducted and what they consist of, but that's a problem for me.
Yeah, you can test these people, and I think you will find many black people, many white people will fall under the auspice of being prejudice. We all make prejudice assumptions. Black people, to a great extent, you know, we'll talk about the Middle East. I'm just going to use this for an example. And we'll talk about how you can radicalize people. Now, the definition of radicalize is when a person or people influence you in an extreme way to accept their political ideas, their political philosophy. Black people, too, have been radicalized You see, whites have taught us and have educated us. And ironically, since we have had more black police officers working for law enforcement, mass incarceration has increased. You see, stop and frisk, these things have increased. So even though we think we have black people there, it's more than just having a black person working at an institution. If the institution foundation is racist to begin with, it's like if you have a black person working for the Klan. He'll still go out and abuse black people because that's the Klan's agenda. So if you work for a racist institution, an institution that has its roots as the slave patrol, and the primary purpose was to harass and restrict the freedoms of black people, even though you have black people there, it's still difficult for those black people in that community to have the type of freedom that they should have. So these tests will just tell you about the individual, but we need to change the very foundation of the institution.
So now, is that the attitude from the days of slavery, when the one slave would say, "Massa, let me do it. I can show you how, I can beat him harder than you can."
Right. That's right. Okay. That's right. And this is happening all across America, regardless of the occupation. If it's, we see this problem in education, where black boys who commit the same type of infraction as a white child does, he's punished worse. So those schools and their punishment reflects what the courts are doing, mass incarceration, what the police officers are doing. So all this was set up to maintain the status quo. And even though we work there, we don't control the agenda of the institution. So most of us are just fulfilling out whatever need that the institution tells us to do.
Well, talk about the universities and what you had said about how the teachers are being instructed to teach once they get their diplomas from the university and come back to the local school districts.
Okay, say that again, please.
You remember you were telling me if people from our community go to a university to become a teacher, the university is set up to educate the white male child.
Oh, yes. Education by design was created for the upper class white male child, and that child only. That's why we, oftentimes I say it's a trick question when people ask me, what's wrong with these schools? What's wrong with the police? Well, nothing. They were created to do exactly what they're doing. Only outside of a historical context, we see something wrong because we're not getting the results or the outcome that we think we should have. But all social scientists, anytime someone tries to understand a problem, for example, if one of us rushed to the hospital today, right after this show, the doctor can't immediately treat you. He has to get some historical information about you before he can treat you. What did you eat that's causing this chest pain? Do you have heart attack problems or high blood pressure problems in your family? Are you allergic to anything? They must get some historical information about you before they can treat you, so they can understand what's going on with you. Now, when you have the police and you have these schools, if the schools were designed solely for the upper class white male child, then of course other people will struggle because that curriculum was not designed for those other children. Even though we're there, it wasn't designed for us. So every class you'll see white males as role models in philosophy and math and sociology and psychology and philosophy. And the whole nine. It's about fostering his development. And for 400 years it has worked to keep that upper class white male in charge. Out of all these humans that occupy America, we have all these groups fighting and jockeying for power. The Arabs are fighting. The Mexicans are fighting for power. The Chinese, the African Americans, all these folks. But some way, somehow, the upper class white males have been on top. Even though the statistics say that the African immigrants, who are the best academic students in America, according to a Harvard study in 2007, and the Asian students, who are second, they outperform the upper class white male children in these schools. But that doesn't translate to them being the power brokers. So even those students who come from other places who do well in this system and outperform them at these schools do not become the power brokers, the movers and shakers, and the captains of industry in the society because it wasn't designed for them to be at those positions.
Yeah, so basically, I guess, whatever your level of competence academically has nothing to do with how they want to manage the system, which in most cases you would want the brightest and the best, as we've used that phrase before. One of the things I'm curious about is why, I don't know that you can answer this, but I have to throw this out here, the white psyche in that when we saw Rodney King, we saw him being beaten. Right. When they saw him resisting arrest. When we saw Eric Garner being strangled to death, they saw him resisting arrest, etc. So, and I'm saying this is outside of law enforcement. This is just like the population. Although I do give a lot of kudos to the young, because it was mostly young Caucasians who were part of the rallies nationwide. Mm-hmm. So I know that they are of a different mindset. Most of them anyway are of a different mindset because they have to, I guess, wonder or worry about whatever kind of feedback or blowback they're going to get from their communities. But why would you say the majority population perceives our injustices different than they would if it were someone Caucasian, or even an animal for that matter, because a dog gets better treatment in many cases?
No, good question. And some of my students asked me that before the semester just ended. Mm-hmm. And I had to remind them that when you look at American history, whites typically saw justice totally different than the Native Americans saw justice, than the African Americans saw justice, or the Asians. Remember, for them, for 400 years, their fathers taught them that to rape and kidnap and terrorize people of color was just, that a black man had no rights that a white man had to respect. It was part of the Plessy versus Ferguson decision in 1896. Mm-hmm. So they saw justice, Jim Crow, and the whole nine from their lens. But their lens, to a great extent, has been based off injustice, you see. So the fairness that we the lens that we look through, they don't look at this world the same way. If they did, we wouldn't have this type of society that is just, it's been injustice run amok, where we have a war on drugs. Now, very few of us would have to study this at all. We all know where the drugs come from. When they come from Colombia, Mexico, they hit the white suburbs first. And then the white suburbs flood black and brown communities with drugs. Mm-hmm. Our policymakers, despite this reality, they fight the war on drugs in black and brown communities. Not where the drugs come from, but where they go. So we won't go to the source. We're not kicking those doors in out there in the suburbs. White suburbs have the #1 drug addicts in America.
Oh, yes.
You see, the biggest drug dealers don't live in Detroit. They live in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And we all know this, but their sense of justice and what's unjust, right, since they've been taught in a culture that says that everything about us is negative and everything about them is positive. So when they see things like that, when they want to apply justice or a drug war, they come to us, or injustice, if you will. You see, they don't see themselves in the same way that they see other people. Even their infractions, if a white child does something, this one white child on the news not long ago, he killed some people. They said, well, he was so affluent. That he didn't know what he was doing.
One in Texas.
Right. They made excuses for this person. Yes, but if you're black and you've been in a poor neighborhood, poor education, hey, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Go to jail. You see, so they see things this way, and every study conveys that the way they see justice is not just.
You know, it's interesting. D.L. Hughley did a comedy routine based on that. He said, this kid got off for killing 4 people, and they blamed it on what they call affluenza. Yes. He said, well, if they can claim affluenza, then if I get in a problem, can I claim brokelepsy?
That's right. Yeah, because they do not, and this is an issue, that I often point out. We have different fathers. We do not have fathers in our community who we revere that believed in slavery, that believed in kidnapping people and terrorizing people and castrating people and lynching people. We don't look up to people like that in our community. They have a community totally different. That's their founding fathers. That's who's on Mount Rushmore and on our dollars and everything. And millions of children in school today are being taught to look up to people who were unjust towards other folks. And this is why injustice and the ideas connected to it is so pervasive. We've just been asleep at the wheel, if you will.
One of the things that strikes me is that, let's say a person with common sense or decency or civility or morality should step outside of whatever the indoctrination is, because their conscience would tell them, by just being conscious, that these things are not right, even though they've been indoctrinated or acculturated to that particular mindset. Something within you is supposed to say, this is not just, which is still why I have trouble understanding. Rodney King got hit 50, 60 times or more, and he just laid there. So for anyone to say that, he deserved that. And one of the things that disturbed me, and I'm going to bring this to the viewers' attention next week. Peter King, the Republican representative in New York, was saying that had Eric Garner not been heavy, asthmatic, overweight, and that thing, he would still be alive. And I thought that was one of the sickest things I had heard, that he's going to blame Eric Garner's death on the fact that he was obese. I say that that had nothing to do with a chokehold. That's crazy.
Or most Americans would die as a result, because America is an obese place to begin with. But they use it as a scapegoat, not to look at their own actions and their ideas about injustice. So you have black and brown and colored people over here. We see justice one way according to the studies, but whites see it totally different.
Whew. It seems to me you talked about whites wanting power and maintaining power and how they go about doing it, even though they are a minority in the world, for that matter. And the propaganda has a lot to do with the fact that they control the media, which is used to control the minds of people. And I think that a lot of anger happened when the women's lib phase began back in the 70s, and more white women had less white babies, of course, and the men began to realize that, and they were having zero population growth. So the next thing you know, Ronald Reagan announces that the Iron Curtain has come down, and they started adopting babies from Serbia. And at first they were having a struggle between Serbia and Croatia. I said, okay, it's two countries. Then the propaganda came out that there was a struggle between Serbia and the Muslims. I'm like, wait a minute. Serbia's a country, but Muslim, that was a people. And then you find out that they were trying to have this wipe out, as a matter of fact. They wanted to kill up as many Croatians as they could because they were not white. And they could not multiply the white population by adopting from Serbia only.
Yeah, this is true. We go over some things where around that time when it came to white folks' attention that other people were growing in population and they weren't. There's certain things you must do to solidify your position. This is, history is such a fascinating and best teacher, right? Let's say this. Let's say, today is Monday. Yesterday was Sunday. Let's say in the book of Exodus, right? A lot of people went to church the other day. It's just a story from, 4,000 years ago when those slaves got their freedom, okay? And not too long after getting their freedom, their former slave master became paranoid about these slaves growing in population, and maybe they might attach to an enemy that might do unto them as he has done unto these slaves. So he had a plan.
Robinson, wasn't it?
Yeah, he had a plan, and his plan was destroy the males. Because if you destroy the males, you would decrease the population. If you got 2 million men, over 2 million men in prison, that's the lack of folks who would be engaged in having children. So black population has stayed around 13, 14% the last 40 years. Now the Mexicans and the Spanish folks, they're the number one minority in population now. Our population, due to homicide, incarceration rates, and a whole bunch of other deadly factors, have capped us at around 13, 14%.
I'm not convinced that it has stayed 13 and 14% because, and I do realize that that the majority of the prisoners are black. But I'm having difficulty believing that is the reason why we hover over 13 and 14%. I think that there is some sleight of hand going on, prestidigitation as they call it, and that these little boxes they keep putting on the census. Now all of a sudden, if the three of us spoke Spanish fluently, we could check that box. Hispanic is not an ethnic group. It was created just like the definition of white was created in 1790 and the definition of black was created in 1790, because there were more black people in this country than there were Germans, more blacks than Irish, more than Scottish, more than Italian, etc. So all of a sudden they said, I know what we can do. What can you do? Well, Billy Bob said, Bubba, well, we're going to add up all the Polish, all the Italian, all the Irish, all the Scottish together. And voila, that'll make more of us than them. Wait a minute. Oh, okay, I know. We have to call them white. So we'll call them white, and then we're taking these census, and there'll be more of us than them. That's crazy, but that's what they did.
Oh, yeah.
So recently, now they come up with white, black, and Hispanic. Dominicans are black, but they can check Hispanic. That keeps the percentage down.
Yeah,
right?
it does. Those things as well. But, you know, we went through a period where homicide and incarceration rate, now the homicide rate, it's good that's been on the decline. But the homicide rate in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the mass incarceration rate does and did take a toll on the number of black men who would be out here or alive, increasing the population rate. So what you're saying is true, too, because they have played games with that.
Right.
But when you have, let me give you an example. Tim Wise, who is a popular anti-racist activist out here, he documents in the American Journal the lack of health care just for black people between 1991 and the year 2000. Right, just the lack of health care and the racism connected to black folks not being able to get health care. We lost, according to the medical AMA journal they put out, we lost 1 million black people as a result of not being able to have access to health care. That's 1 million. We're not talking homicide, which is health care. So that's like you waking up tomorrow and every person in the city of Detroit is dead. This is a lot of people. This is just 1 million as it relates to not having health care between 1991 and the year 2000. 1 million people. Now you connect the suicide, the homicide, and all the other things to that. We, you know, it kind of lessened our numbers to a great extent.
Tell me about the time when all of a sudden the street numbers, which had been labeled illegal, became the lottery. Voila, it's legal all of a sudden. And I tell you what, you all can't have a business of street numbers in your community. We're taking it. But here, it threw crack or whatever over there, selling that.
Right.
Now, how did that affect the population decline?
With crack and heroin and all of that epidemic. You have so many people died, right, overdose. And here's one thing that, you know, we talked about before. The lies that you don't see. For example, black women, out of all women in America, lead this nation in abortions. Now, there are people who have actually tallied up these numbers. Right now, we're averaging around 1,400 to 1,500 abortions a day.
Oh, God.
A day. They said so many millions of black people from 1993 or the 90s, if we wouldn't have had that type of, but we have about 20 million more people. But since we lead in abortion, not only are our men, too many of our men not engaged in families and having children, right, and establishing families, but we have so many lives because of certain economic factors that will never see this world to begin with.
You know, for the first time, now maybe somebody else has seen these commercials, but I have not. For the first time last week, there was a commercial, meaning one commercial, on birth control. We have just dozens and dozens of commercials on Viagra, and then we have legislation against abortions, against parent, the clinics that provide information. Mm-hmm. But we don't have the same thing in prevention to stop abortions.
Again, history again, the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, who was extreme white supremacist, had a plan to exterminate the Negro, to make sure that abortions and things of this nature was readily available to us, more so than other communities, because the plan wasn't to stop the population of white people. So Planned Parenthood today, disproportionately from that history, that we have more Planned Parenthood in our communities than any other community in America. But this was her plan, and people can simply YouTube this, and they have her, the letters and stuff that she wrote about how she wanted to decrease the population of black folks. So they had a historical agenda. So all of these things where we are, let's say abortions, let's say police brutality, let's say education, right? If we understand the history, people put these things in place for us to have these type of outcomes. But if we don't understand the history, we just say, wow, we have a lot of abortions, or the police are really beating us, and our kids getting the worst grades, they're the most illiterate. But why? What's the historical source of this? People designed it this way. They wanted this type of outcome for black people. And until we understand